And before we jump into the workshop, I have just a couple of really short announcements. The first is that we are offering a student workshop on this exact same topic of goal setting, and it's actually in person at our Oakland clinic, and it's a small group workshop, and it's offered twice. So there's one coming up next week at 4 p.m., and then we have one coming up in April at 4 p.m. And these workshops are only $25, and you can go ahead and learn more about them or sign up on our website, and I'll include all of that information on in the chat box as well. And these workshops are really a small preview to a larger comprehensive college readiness course offer this summer called Beyond High School. So Beyond High School is a 2-week college readiness executive functioning coaching course designed to equip students with a set of some essential skills needed for college success. So some of the things we'll cover will include things like goal setting, time management, study skills, test taking strategies, note taking skills. And we'll also cover some essential executive functioning skills like organization, time management, problem solving. So more information can be found on our website at strategiesforlearning.com/BHS for Beyond High School. And I'll also include the information in the chat box below. So to introduce our speaker for today, it is BJ McIntyre. So BJ is the Director of Education at Strategies for Learning. He holds a master's degree from Columbia University, a teaching credential, and a youth resilience coach certification. He has over a decade of hands-on experience supporting students and young adults with learning challenges, motivational difficulties, and executive functioning deficits, both inside the classroom and outside the classroom. So with that being said, I will go ahead and let BJ screen share his slide, and then he'll get started. So just give us a few seconds to make that transition.
All righty. Okay, I'm doing that now. Thank you so much for that great introduction, Christine. I really appreciate it. So let me go ahead and share the screen. All righty, so as Christine mentioned, the title of this workshop is Effective Goal Setting for Students with Executive Function Challenges. I'd like to welcome you. I know a lot of you are here because you have a child or you know someone who really struggles with goal setting, either due to motivation or executive function challenges. And a lot of the times we don't stop to think that this is actually not an innate skill, that goal setting can be a deliberate process and it can be taught. Not only are there frameworks for it, there are strategies that you can implement within those frameworks. So that's what the goal of this session is for. And let's go ahead and outline the agenda. All right, so first we're gonna do a quick little icebreaker. It won't take too long just to kind of warm us up to what we're gonna be discussing today. The first real section, we're gonna really cover student dynamics and the importance of a needs assessment before really getting into the goal setting process. So we'll go over some tips and strategies regarding that and some information regarding that. The next thing we're going to discuss in the next big section is tailoring your goals and some goal setting frameworks. Some of them you may have heard of, others might not be as familiar to you, but I do want to introduce them because I think they may be helpful in helping you with your learner on their goal setting journeys. And I'll also have a little homework assignment attached to that. And don't worry, it's not like a real homework assignment, just kind of a thought experiment or something for you to think about en route to really helping your learner and taking this information and using it. And the last thing is some evidence-based strategies for nurturing persistence, because it doesn't just stop at setting the goal, obviously, right? How are you going to really maintain that motivation and really support them on that journey? Because they're still developing, they still kind of need that extra nudge and route to that. So like, what are some evidence-based strategies that we can use to really support them on that journey? So, and then we'll have a quick interactive activity associated with that. And then we'll go ahead and close out with a Q&A. All righty. All right, so the first thing, if you wouldn't mind indulging, I would like everyone to just maybe think for a second, and I'll actually give you about 10 seconds to think about it and read this, and then 1 minute to go ahead and put this in the chat. So please think about one short-term goal, and this is like any goal that you want to accomplish within the next, let's say, month, 1 month to 3 months. And what is one long-term goal that you have? Something that's like at least a year away, a year and over. And this can be a goal for yourself or a goal that you actually have for your learner. So again, if you could post one short-term goal that you have within the next 1 to 3 months, and one long-term goal that you have that you want to accomplish well over a year from now. And actually, let me put on the timer now. All right, 1 minute. Actually, let me go ahead and participate. What is short-term goal that I have? Short. Alrighty, so what I shared is one short-term goal, and we have a couple of seconds, so I'll go ahead and start reading. Oh, yep, time expired. So I'll go ahead and start reading some out. So I shared that I want to get back into the gym 3 times per week. And that's a short-term goal. I feel like I can accomplish that and make that a consistent habit within a month or two. And a long-term goal is I'm actually building like a small tiny house in my backyard, and I'm not necessarily done with it. I still have to add some bells and whistles. So that's an ongoing long-term project that should take over a year. Um, so Mika's short-term goal, initiate and do majority of small homework alone for the student. Okay. And also, a long-term goal for their child is to initiate and plan a large assignment. Awesome. So we may have some strategies that address that actually. Arita sent a long-term goal, help son get ready for college and beyond. Nice. Yep, absolutely a long-term goal. I'm working with some students where that's actually a short-term goal. Stephanie's short-term goal would like to improve her own time management to have more free time. Absolutely, and that can definitely be accomplished in the short term. All right, thank you everybody for sharing. Really appreciate that. All right, so that was just a little warm up to what we're going to be discussing, and then you'll see how it connects a little bit later. All right, so the first section, big section that I want to go over is understanding student dynamics. And related to that, we're really going to cover why understanding need, quotes, matters for effective goal setting, and why your child should understand their strengths and weaknesses. So let's go ahead and start with why understanding need matters. And give me 1 second. All right, so sorry about that. All right, so the first thing I'll point out basically is that it helps you address unmet needs and identifies hidden obstacles. So if you see to the left, I don't know if you're familiar with this framework. It was created by Abraham Maslow, who was an American psychologist studying motivation. And motivation, again, is a key aspect, obviously, of goal setting, because if you can't sustain that energy towards your goals, then you obviously won't meet those goals. And then Maslow really wanted to understand what hindrances, what obstacles gets in the way of motivation. And then he has a hierarchy that he established that really starts at the base level, where you really have to address the student's physiological needs. And with that, I would say you'll see in the next slide, I actually have some examples of like across these different categories. And a lot of us would like to think, obviously, that we have a lot of these needs met and served. But a lot of the times that may or may not be true, because we're not, around our kids 24/7. There's a lot of situations that are beyond our control. So I just want to bring that to your attention. And maybe you didn't know it was beyond your control. Maybe it's something that you weren't aware of. So this is just a good framework to really start that analysis on a needs assessment. What it also helps you do is really prioritize effectively. How can you really start with self-actualization, which is really the learning where learning actually occurs and where students actually reach their full potential? How can you get to that level if you really haven't addressed some of these lower level issues? So it really just allows you to prioritize like what to address first to meet those students' needs. And again, I'll go over some practical examples in the next slide. And the last thing I do want to address is that it really does help you build a strong foundation, and it helps make those goals feel achievable to the student. Obviously, like a lot low self-esteem, when you go to self-esteem, that is a lot of the times like mediated by their ability to meet their goals, their ability to make progress towards their goals. And if a lot of these lower level needs aren't met and they're not making progress to their goals, those goals, it obviously will affect their confidence, their self-esteem, and then their ability to even want to try, right? So that's why this framework I feel is really important to understand and just know as a parent to help support your student in that journey. Um, so as promised, these are just some ideas. I wanted to really think of some universal scenarios, and this is by no means exhaustive, but just some universal situations that we all might find ourselves in, students, and even just us as adults. So juggling sleep and extracurricular activities at the base level. A lot of the times when I'm working with students, like the first thing I ask is, did you get enough sleep? Did you eat enough food? Are you exercising? If these basic needs aren't met, it's really hard to kind of focus on anything else, especially if you didn't get enough sleep, right? Especially if you come to a session or you're coming to school because you're not eating enough or your diet isn't on point. Um, Another thing to consider, for example, like managing crowded or noisy environments. What if the student has a processing disorder and you haven't really investigated that or gotten the student an IEP or a 504 or something that they really need to accommodate that in different environments? That's actually something to be aware of to address before you really start going up the ladder to address the higher aspects of goal setting. So I won't go through everything else in detail, but you can see safety needs, navigating bullying, harassment, or social exclusion. That's a real thing that a lot of students go through, no matter who you are. Fear of public speaking or presentations. Now, I mean, a lot of us would think of that as right. That's not a real fear. Somebody who's struggled with social anxiety for most of my life, and then you'll see, like, even a strategy that I use. Like, I'm kind of socially anxious right now and doing this presentation, but what helps me is really organizing my presentations and making sure that I rehearse and have everything in a row, and it kind of helps me kind of organize my thoughts. If a student doesn't have those structures or they don't feel like they're in a safe environment or it's kind of coupled with the bullying, harassment, and social exclusion, it really is a real fear that needs to be addressed, right? Love and belonging, obviously feeling like the new kid, feeling misunderstood. That's why empathy is really important to us as educators, but also parents. Self-esteem, low confidence, negative mindset, really important to help a student build that growth mindset. I'll talk a little bit later about positive reinforcement and obviously why that's important. And some of the younger students might not do this as much, but I know getting to middle school is a huge thing. Comparing yourself to others is a huge thing, or feeling like you're always watched is a huge thing. So just reminding the students to really try not to compare yourself to others, set your own individual goals that are really tailored to you, which we'll also get into, is going to be really essential for that. And then self-actualization. This is actually the accomplishing the goals that really match the student's values and desires. And what can limit that is limited opportunities for creative and self-expression, finding their unique voice. So whatever you can do as a parent to really facilitate that, ask them about their dreams, like do summer camps, travel, do whatever you can to expose them to different ideas and interests, and really encourage them to explore those different interests and leverage them. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is why your child should understand their own strengths and weaknesses. This is another big one that I really want to discuss. One thing I do as the director at SFL is I do a lot of the intakes. Me and Stephanie does a lot of the intakes for a lot of the younger students. I do some of the younger students and students who have some executive function challenges. One of the things that I noticed over and over and over again, because during the intake we have a template where we're really doing our own needs assessment, is that students do not understand their own strengths. Like, it's common. For some reason, they're aware of what their challenges are. They're aware of why they're in session. Somebody either told them over and over again, or maybe they're told themselves, they beat themselves up about it, but just they usually do not know what their strengths are. And this is where actually I've noticed the parents actually know their students a lot more than they know themselves, because part of the intake process, we actually split, we kind of do a divide and conquer. So I'll meet the parents first. No, I meet the students first, and then I'll go ahead and meet the parents to kind of compare notes. And the parents, when I ask them the same question, they go on and on and on. They have an exhaustive list of, oh, my student is great at this. They're confident. They're verbal. They're good at solving problems. They just have this whole list that students aren't even aware of. So just for students to know this about themselves, not only does it help build confidence, but as I'll talk about, they'll learn how to actually leverage those strengths to overcome those challenges that they're kind of concerned about. But it's also really important for them to understand their challenges and what they really need to grow in, obviously, for self-advocacy purposes, and so they can develop the right strategies to really address those needs. And then the last thing that I want to really point out is, like, how do you come up with those strategies? At SFL, we really like to use a strength-based model. So we really teach students how to leverage their strengths to overcome their weaknesses. It really allows students to take ownership. So not only does it build confidence, knowing their own strengths, but it actually helps them become skilled at the goal setting process, at accomplishing goals, and develop strategies that actually meet whatever goals they're trying to create by using their strengths to overcome their weaknesses. And then their weaknesses actually eventually become strengths, right? It's an iterative process. So this is very, very important. And just to go over a quick example, so I have this case study. So this is Josette. She is a bright and curious 10-year-old who struggles with expressing herself verbally in class discussions and presentations, kind of like me, right? So I maybe internalize that a little bit. So again, her biggest strength is organization and written expression. So this student is just really detail oriented. She's really expressive with her ideas. She knows how to organize her thoughts on paper. She's really good at that. But her biggest weakness, her biggest challenge is just shyness and verbal communication. She has low self-esteem. She's just really self-conscious and has social anxiety. So just getting out there when she's actually trying to perform what she actually knows, it just doesn't come across. And I know we all either know somebody who can relate to that, or we relate to that ourselves. So how can Josette use her strength to help her overcome this weakness or this challenge? Josette can write down and organize her thoughts on paper before speaking. So, for example, she can use a mind map that either a therapist or a teacher can show her, or that a parent can show her how to create. She can use that structure to organize her thoughts, and then kind of rehearse, either bounce the ideas off of a parent, rehearse in the mirror with this detailed organizational plan that she put together. And then over time, she'll get better at the verbal communication with that rehearsal and that organizational ability that she naturally has. All righty, so quick intermission. So with all that we just talked about, I want you to just take a moment to maybe apply this to your own child. And you don't have to write anything in the chat. If you want to, feel free to. But just for 1 minute, maybe think about these 3 things. What is your child's biggest strength? What is their biggest challenge? And then maybe thinking about Josette's case, how do you think your child can use their strength to overcome their challenge? So I'll just set the timer for 1 minute. And feel free, if you want to share in the chat, go ahead. I just wanted to be mindful of time. But you can write this down on paper. So me, I have a similar case of a student who they really struggle with cognitive flexibility, which is just kind of the ability to shift between different tasks and different ideas. And they get really, really frustrated. However, they're really, really good at routine and following rules. So one strategy we actually work on is, like, when we follow hard to understand directions that require either a lot of shifting or that have multiple steps, we just break it down. We break it down into manageable chunks. So something as simple as kind of just, circling each verb and underlining the important information, and then kind of using that to chunk it. This is step 1. This is step 2. Let's work on this one at a time. That really works for the student. And then the student actually internalized that process, and now they do it themselves. So That's one example that I use. All right, 5 more seconds. All righty, so hopefully that was a good thought experiment or thought exercise to kind of think about how your child can kind of do the same thing. Just really understanding and developing that metacognition is really going to be essential for your child to really do that essential foundation of goal setting. Which brings me to section 2. So tailoring goals and goal setting frameworks. So this is kind of the meat of this. So I think this is really important to pay attention to. The first thing that I'll go over is how do I help my child tailor goals to their specific learning profile? This question is important. That's why the foundation is really understanding their strengths and weaknesses. You're going to use that to actually establish that learning profile and then tailor goals to that. And then B, how can using a goal setting framework help keep my child on track? So we'll discuss that as well. All right, so the first thing that I'll discuss is embracing choice and ownership. That's going to be the first reason that tailoring your goals to this specific learning profile is helpful. It really does develop that sense of ownership for the student because establishing a framework or them understanding like how they learn, like either whether you're visual, auditory, or kinesthetic, is going to be essential. And I know there's a lot of debate right now in educational circles, and this may be on the scope of this, that, learning styles, there may not be a lot of research to back that up, that people have different learning styles. What's really important is teaching across different modalities. So actually teaching in every way, visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. But I think the point I want to make is that it's just important to explore for your child to really explore what they're comfortable with and what really works for them. So maybe they are more of an auditory learner by heart or by practice. Maybe it helps them to listen to audiobooks while they're annotating a reading passage. Maybe that helps them really access their memory. And honestly, that's a good universal strategy. It would help you understand like how reading is modeled and appropriate diction and reading fluency, for example. So I think that's important. Not only understanding their learning styles, but also their interests is going to be important. So really tying their passions to their goal setting. So for example, understanding that your child wants to be a coder, maybe they're a gamer and they're really into video games, and then you interrogate them about that. Like, really, what's at the root of this? And they just really like the idea of game creation and exploration, and just really helping them understand how those interests really tie to what they're doing now, and really ties to their academic success. It really helps. And we're going to go over the goal setting framework and how like the long-term goals, what you're really supposed to do is chunk that down into short-term goals. So maybe their long-term goal is to be a coder. Maybe that's something they really love to do. And then it's kind of hitting in like them playing video games all day. Really coaching them on how that applies to their academics and their current academic performance right now is really important. And maybe it'll help you come up with some different strategies or some motivational strategies that'll help them really sustain progress, which we'll talk about a little bit more later as well. Another thing is that it's gonna, and then we're gonna go over a framework right after this, but it also helps you tailor goals and specific strategies. So one strategy that I actually went over, or strategy framework that I went over in a recent PD with staff, is called the IC method. And it's just a way to help students like remember how to come up with strategies that are tailored to them. So going back to like the example of somebody who maybe, it helps them listen to an audiobook when they're doing reading annotations. They can use the IC strategy, which is essentially an individualized goal that is systematic, efficient, and effective. And that's beyond the scope of this. We're really going to go into goal setting strategies, but this will be recorded. And if that's something you want to look up, I feel like that's an interesting framework to help students come up with strategies. But coming up with an actual goal setting framework to kind of encompass that is going to be essential overall, which we're going to get into next. So here are some examples of some goal setting frameworks. I know some of you probably heard of SMART. And again, SMART is really important because it's a way to tailor your goals and to actually remember and to keep you on track. So they're specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. And then we'll actually go over an example of SMART next, so you can actually see this in action. Another enough, the SMART curriculum. So not SMART goal, but there's a curriculum that's totally about executive functioning. It's called SMART. And they use what's called the CANDO goal. And what I really like about this, it ties into what we talked about as far as the needs assessment. It's one of the frameworks, or one of the few frameworks that actually accounts for the obstacles that students go through and helps them actually remember that in the framework and to account for that in their goal setting. So it's very similar to SMART. Like specific, your goals should be clear, they should be appropriate. And actually, to break this down a little bit more, so appropriate just simply means that it should be appropriate to you. So if the student has, for example, really been struggling in math, and for whatever reason they've been kind of bombing it and getting F's year after year after year, and then they have a goal of getting an A the very next semester, that may not be appropriate. It's possible, but I think a goal is really to get at least a C, right? Just based on what the struggles were that kind of led to that struggle in the first place. You want to make it numerical, so similar to SMART. All that means is measurable. So you use a report card to measure, use percentages, so a way to kind of track your progress. Doable is a way to just break it down into chunks, as we discussed. So if you have this long-term goal of wanting to be a coder, a gaming coder, well, first you have to graduate high school, right? And then how do you graduate high school? You break that down into chunks. So you can create multiple goals with these frameworks, obviously, and then create multiple chunks created to those goals. It just really depends on how you tailor it. And then finally, this is something a lot of people haven't heard. I like PACT goals because this is just an easy mnemonic to remember. So it just stands for purposeful goals. So goals that you can really strive intention towards. Actionable, so you can break it down into steps. Continuous, something that is always available to you, and trackable, again, like going back to numerical and something that you can measure. So just to go over an example, so going back to Josette, our case study, the bright 10-year-old who struggles with verbal communication but is strong with written expression. Here's a goal. So her goal is to actually improve her verbal expression during class discussions and presentations. How do you measure that? Well, Josette will actively participate in at least 3 class discussions and deliver 2 presentations with clear and coherent verbal communication. So this is something that can be worked on with the teacher, with an educational therapist. It's something that the teacher can check in about periodically. But this is like a mini goal, actually, that's broken down that could be measured en route to her overall goal to get better at verbal class presentations. Is it achievable? Yes, because she will practice speaking in front of a mirror to engage in role-playing exercises. She will seek feedback from teachers, parents, and peers. And this is something also the educational therapist can coach her on, the parent can coach her on. This is something you can actually work with the student on when she develops the strategies that work for her. Perhaps these are IC strategies that will help her en route to this specific goal that you created with her. Are they relevant? Yes, because enhancing her verbal expression aligns with Josette's academic growth and her overall development. And this is where like Maslow's hierarchy of needs come in. Is it time to actually start working on this goal after we've actually addressed all of these other underlying needs kind of leading up to this, so she can self-actualize and actually learn? So yes, this is very relevant to her overall development. And then time-bound or time-based. Josette will achieve this goal by the end of the current school year. So maybe let's imagine that she met with an educational therapist, so she's working with her parent, and they made this goal in January. So she has 4 or 5 months to reach this goal. And then again, this is how she's going to measure it. This is how she's going to achieve it. This is why it's relevant. All right, team. And then you're going to have a homework assignment connected to this, by the way. So just to prepare you for that. But before that, so just to kind of break down one more time, so why is goal setting important, and how does this help keep the child on track? So a framework like this will really help provide clarity and direction. So the goal is gradual release of responsibility. So we really want you guys to understand frameworks like this. It doesn't have to be SMART. It doesn't have to be CANDO. You can even make up your own if you're that creative. just the ideas that is something that can be remembered and something that the student can internalize and actually do on their own. So when I taught in high schools, we actually would have students write their own SMART goals in advisory class, and they would hate it. They would hate it because we would do it every single week. But the idea was to build in that muscle memory and that repetition so students actually knew how to create their own goals. And at that point, it was kind of second nature, like, okay, I'll do the SMART goal. And it wasn't as boring because they'll just get it out the way. They'll do it in like 5 minutes. So once they, and then like, honestly, they won't even have to write it down after a while. I'd highly encourage they do. But after a while, hopefully this is something they truly internalize and they can just do naturally. Like I naturally measure my progress over time. I can naturally pull strategies that where I leverage my strengths to overcome my weaknesses, and I can backwards plan kind of based on this long term view of what I want to do in the future. So hopefully they can internalize all of that. But not only that, it boosts motivation and ownership. So provides clarity and direction. If you're doing this every day, and then like it's something that you're used to, and then that gradual release of responsibility. Here, this is your goal. You created this. You can create more goals with this framework. It really does create this sense of ownership. And once students start creating their own goals, reaching those goals, it just continuously builds confidence, and it just spirals into like a very confident young learner who's able to really self-actualize and reach their full potential. And then the last thing, well, obviously I just spoke to that. It promotes self-awareness and growth. So one thing that should obviously be built in that I do want to mention is continual reflection, because it allows you to refine your goals. So really considering those obstacles, right? What got in the way this week of me kind of reaching this mini goal? Why wasn't I able to submit all of my homework assignments on time in math if that was like my mini goal? What got in the way? Was I procrastinating? Okay, let's go back to the drawing board and kind of address this procrastination issue, and come up with some strategies that address procrastination. Do I need some noise canceling headphones? Do I need to body double? Do I need a quiet environment? And will that allow me to reach this goal of turning in my assignments on time? So it's an iterative process again. And once they really internalize that, it really does allow them to problem solve, and they can basically take the rest from there. And the earlier the better, right? The earlier the better, because once you release them and they're in college, that's it. So the earlier the better. All right. So like I said, here's a homework assignment. And one second. And again, this is gonna be recorded, so this is nothing you have to do now. So just take a second to internalize this. But what I basically want you to do at some point is to revisit your long-term goal that you posted in the chat. And again, we're thinking the long-term goal. The point of posting a short-term goal is to just kind of think about how short-term goals lead into long-term goals. But think about your long-term goal and try to apply the SMART framework. Make it specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Practicing this and practicing that structure, you internalizing this will help you help your student, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. So that's your little homework assignment from SFL. All righty. All right, and then the last thing that I want to go over is just a few evidence-based strategies for nurturing persistence. So essentially, how do I help my child stay focused on achieving their goals? Because it doesn't just stop at achieving the goal, right? You want to sustain progress over time. How do you sustain that motivation to reach your goal? How do you build that persistence and that resilience over time? One thing I think we all know, right, that we all have heard of is that positive reinforcement works. This has been proven over and over again in psychology, Pavlovian psychology. It just does. So this can be anything. This can be praise. This can be just little rewards. I know teachers do it all the time with the stickers and the stars, and they do this on purpose. It's really built into the educational framework because it does work. Students like to be recognized. They like encouragement. They don't want to feel like you're just telling them what to do just for the sake of doing it. They want to feel like, it feels good. And then also this helps build a growth mindset. Like when I do things, I will be rewarded for it. When I do things that are good, I feel good about it. And not only will this build their extrinsic motivation, it'll build their intrinsic motivation. they'll feel really good about their own learning. Because again, like once they release and come up with their own strategies, maybe they'll be able to reward themselves, right? They'll be able to establish some protocols like, okay, I'm going to do my homework and then I'm going to go ahead and watch this TV show or get on Instagram. And this is something I actually work on students with. One strategy is actually to do that, to like take frequent breaks, 25 minutes on, then a 5 minute kind of reward for like working 25 minutes. All right, go ahead, unlock your phone, like get on Instagram, do what you have to do for 5 minutes, set a timer. When it goes off, like go back. Because students are really, they're creatures of instant gratification. So anything you can do to kind of help satisfy that or help use it to help them mediate the goal setting process, I think that's essential. Okay, another thing is collaborating in the goal setting process and kind of monitoring their process. So regularly check in with your child to monitor progress, offer support, adjust goals as needed, fostering adaptability and a sense of partnership. I would say in addition to that is like really tapping into the treatment alliance. So if they're working with an educational therapist, if they're, with their teachers, if they're working with a therapist, really checking in with them as well and making sure that all the goals are aligned and everybody is supporting the student in the right way. So if the student has identified a strategy that works for them, is it being supported? If a student has an IEP or a 504 with accommodations that have been agreed that help, is that being supported? So whatever you can do to like constantly monitor that, either checking in with teachers and just knowing the right questions to ask, and kind of going back to that framework and understanding strategies and building on top of that, I feel like that gives you a language with the teacher to communicate with the teacher and the allied professionals about what your student needs. And one thing I actually didn't mention, like going back to the strengths and weaknesses, when I have intake sessions with students, one of the big things that comes up is self-advocacy. And a lot of them like feel like they're stupid and they use that language a lot. So to develop their metacognition, a lot of times I actually use the language of executive function. I'll tell them like, oh, no, this is just a working memory thing, right? Remember, we talked about working memory. And also remember, there's like this big poster of like working memory strategies. Remember like this visualization technique we came up with, or remember how we chunked it out and that helped you with this one lesson. And then sometimes I'll have a breakthrough, like, oh yeah, I do remember, I'm not stupid. So like constantly reminding them of that, we're empowering that is helpful. I know that's kind of a segue, but I think that was important to kind of go back and mention. And it does relate to kind of having that language of communication when you're communicating with allied professionals and the teachers, and helping them on that goal monitoring journey or goal setting journey. The last thing I will say is really important is celebrating milestones. So really coupling this with that goal setting framework. So establishing the long-term goal, breaking it down into chunks. And then what if they like hit that chunk? What if they turn in all their homework assignments for that week? Or what if they get an A on this essay en route to being successful in their English class? They got an A because they used some of the study strategies that they learned. How are you going to celebrate that? Are you being deliberate about celebrating that? And it can be simple. It can be just, going out to dinner to celebrate it. Just really letting them know that you care, or even just being over the top. Like I'm really over the top in my sessions. Like I kind of scream, I jump up and down, and the students kind of laugh about it. But I find that it works. They really like that attention. They like feeling like they're celebrated. They like feeling like what they do matters. Kind of going back to that just basic level of positive reinforcement, but really like a pure celebration, an authentic, intentional celebration of those milestones and connected to those milestones. I'll say this is a bit different, and positive reinforcement can be in the moment and kind of formal, and that should be a continuous process. But this is kind of more deliberate and it's tied to those specific milestones and those specific chunks, and really reminding the student to reflect and like understand where they've come from. And it also builds that resilience, that inner resilience in the student. All right, so I have one more activity for you guys. So speaking of positive reinforcement, celebrating milestones, some ideas, like I said, is like going to dinner, or just like the stickers, or giving them a little present, or just saying good job, high five. why don't you share one positive reinforcement strategy that you use with your either your student or your child? Let's try to learn from each other a little bit. Let's see if we can create kind of a bank of strategies for positive reinforcement. Let me set the timer for 2 minutes because I want to be deliberate about that and read over a couple of strategies. So I'll set the timer right now and I'll write a couple in myself. Maybe write as many as you can think of. All right, some that I'm writing in the chat now. And this is like a lot of when I was in the classroom, I would utilize this a lot. So we would have like movie days, games. We would go on little walking trips to celebrate like a successful week. YouTube. Oh yeah, in my educational therapy sessions, I have a student who really likes to watch cat videos. So like every time he does a really good job, we'll have like a 5 minute break, watch cat videos. There's a clinician in the clinic. We have kind of like the soccer. I forgot what that game is called. It's like table soccer, I guess. They play table soccer after every successful session. All right, let me go ahead and read a couple. We have 1 more minute in the timer. Earning points towards a larger prize, Stephanie. Oh, I love that. That's a great strategy. And like I like that strategy because you can think long term. So like you're constantly accumulating points until you kind of reach that long-term goal. I really like that strategy. A dance party, I love it. Squishy prizes, cute stationery. I love it. Malik likes to remind students of prior successes. All right, the timer went off. Malik likes to remind students of prior successes. Oh, absolutely. That's a huge one. Celebrate. That's like part of the celebrating the milestones. That's a great one. Free time on the Nintendo. Hey, that's huge. All righty. Yep. So it can be very open ended, and also I think what really helps is like understanding their interests and going back to that critical piece is going to be really important because you can leverage that. That's why this can be infinite. There's infinite possibilities. So understanding their interests and kind of leveraging that and kind of tying it to that sustained motivation is going to be essential. Let me see if there's a few others. Oh, tying it to student choice. Students can choose an activity they want to do. That's a huge one. Desk pet. I gotta talk to you about that one. Interesting. Go get a stuffed animal to work with for the day. I like that. It's like a study buddy too. Pick. Mika says he can pick dinner and snack choice. Oh, I like that. When all homework is done, he is allowed for screen time. Also, oh, I love that too. So a lot of students, and then I talk to students about whether or not their screen time or Instagram use, is it a privilege or is it something that they have to earn? And that can be hit or miss. And I think that's something to maybe like reflect on. And I'm not like your parenting style is your parenting style, but maybe it's I don't if you haven't thought about it in that kind of framework. Like, is it a privilege or if it's something that they have to earn? And a lot of students don't think about it. They're just like, oh, I don't know, I'm just allowed to be on Instagram. And I just like the way that Mika framed it. He is allowed for screen time because that is a reward. That's how it's kind of framed. So I think that's powerful. All righty. All right, thank you for indulging. That said, I think we ended a little early. Yeah, 13 minutes early, that's fine. So just to kind of overview what we've gone over to summarize. So in this goal setting presentation, effective goal setting for students with executive function challenges. First, we went over the need for understanding student dynamics, So specifically why understanding need matters for effective goal setting. We also went over why your child should understand their own strengths and weaknesses and why that's essential. The next section we went over is how to tailor goals using goal setting frameworks. So we went over things like SMART, CANDO, PAT goals, specifically covering how to help your child tailor their goals to their specific learning profile, again, informed by their strengths and weaknesses, and how using a goal setting framework can help keep them on track. And finally, we just went over just some basic evidence-based strategies for nurturing persistence and building resilience, which includes how to help your child stay focused on achieving their goals. That said, I hope that was helpful. I hope I introduced the framework, some tools, some ways to think about things to help your child en route to their goals. I know goal setting, again, it's sometimes it's seen as like natural. Believe me, it's not innate. It's considered an executive function skill. It's something that can be taught. It's something that can be improved over time. And it's something that really doesn't just apply to academics. It applies to every aspect of life. So it's a really important topic to discuss, and I hope you got something out of this. All right, that said, if there's any questions, that's what this time is dedicated to. So just let me and Christine know in the chat. Otherwise, we can wrap up a little early. So let's see.
So if you have questions, you can enter it into the chat box. So we'll spend maybe 5 minutes on questions, and then we'll close out with some last announcements, like where you can find a recording of the workshop so you can rewatch it or share with someone. I did see one question that came through earlier. Is how do you motivate, or actually the first question was, are some students are some students more motivated than others? And then how do you motivate your own children, your own students?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's for a variety of reasons. Like I don't know, I'm a nerd. I listen to Andrew Huberman a lot, and one of the he's a neuroscientist from Stanford, and like he has a podcast called the Huberman Lab. One of the things he talks about is like basic motivation and resilience training is kind of going back to what I just said, or said in the beginning. It's really tied to like core physiological needs. It really is tied first to did I get enough sleep? Did I get enough do I get enough exercise? And actually increasing those things naturally increases motivation, no matter where you are in that spectrum. So yeah, I do notice like there are varying levels of motivation for a variety of reasons. It can be because of those baseline physiological needs. It can be due to past experiences. So maybe, they've experienced failure over and over again, and they haven't developed that growth mindset or that muscle memory to kind of continue to persist. And it really has affected their motivation over time. And maybe they don't experience a lot of positive reinforcement in their environment. Maybe even there's some negative reinforcement in their environment, not necessarily at home, but at school. And that's why I feel like the needs assessment was really important to discuss as the foundation of goal setting, because motivation varies. Motivation being at the heart of goal setting and sustaining progress, it can be affected by a lot of things, and it can be neurological. So a lot of the students that I work with, they have ADHD, or I have a lot of students on the spectrum. ADHD in particular is considered a disorder of executive function, and a lot of it is characterized by lower levels of dopamine, right? Dopamine is one of the hormones that, lead to motivation. So if you naturally have lower levels of that, then you're going to struggle a little bit more. And I also think that's important to understand. It's important for parents to understand, for students to understand, I'm not lazy. This is an issue of motivation, and there are ways to address it. I'm not prescribing anything, but, with ADHD, there's medication. With what we do, there's strategies that we can implement, ADHD friendly strategies. And with students on the spectrum, a lot of the frustration comes with the inability to shift, and it affects their motivation. And once they start seeing themselves become successful and celebrated, it builds on that motivation. So that's a good, very important question. And I think it definitely could be addressed, like really understanding what the students' needs are and matching the right strategy to the situation. I hope that answered your question.
And I think your presentation also helped answer that question as well.
Great.
So another question from a parent, it says, how do we work with a child to to be part of the goal setting? So one of the challenges that she's experiencing is that her child has complete sort of disinterest in even setting the goal, finds it really bothersome, cumbersome. So what are some strategies that parents could use to help students in that very first step to help them even set a goal?
Oh, it's a good, very good question. I think with anything you do want to start small, and then you want to relate it to things that they're familiar with. So with starting small, is I don't. So the reason I want you guys to really internalize the frameworks, they're complicated. We use them in my advisory class in my old high school, but it was deliberate, it was structured, it was part of the teaching pedagogy there. For you, I mean, if they're resistant, like introducing a whole SMART framework, off the bat may not be wise. There's other frameworks that I didn't mention, like the one word goal. Um, so really just like just having a basic conversation about like what they want to do with their life and at least getting them to commit to a one word goal or like a one phrase goal, like I want to pass English or pass or like what do you really want for yourself and why? And then understanding their why, like when they tell you that, I think is really important. And then again, like tying it to their interests. So like the kid who wants to be a coder, really understanding that you have to sustain effort, you have to set goals and measure them to know where you're going. And tying it to something relatable, like since you want to be a coder and you play video games all day, well, tell me about this video game that you play. What is the goal of the video game? Okay, interesting. What are some strategies that you use to reach that goal in the video game? Okay, interesting. How is that process different from your school goals? Let's just practice for just one day. Let's just practice it and like see how it works out. So I think kind of building them up a little bit can help if they're a little bit resilient, tying it into things that they're already interested in, practicing with things they're already interested in, maybe just meeting them where they're at for a minute, really discussing like their strategies in Minecraft and how they're meeting that goal in Minecraft and using that language like, oh, that was a cool SMART goal you used to like, beat the boss in Minecraft. And then maybe one day like sneak it in there or something like, you know what? Let's just maybe when they're in a good mood, let's try this out. Let's try this out on your English class and see what happens. But I think in general, just again, there's no one way, one method, but overall understanding their interests is really going to be effective. Starting small, I think, is going to be really effective, and just having that conversation continuously until you find a breakthrough.
Mm. And I think a big part of what educational therapists do is to take that role on behalf of the parent. Of course, we can't
Mm.
replace the parent, but a student is going to respond very differently to their mom, being like, okay, let's set this goal together versus, maybe an educational therapist or a coach that they, have a different kind of relationship, a different kind of bond with. That could make a big difference for a lot of our students, especially some of our teenagers. So that's something important to keep in mind. So
Absolutely.
to finish off, let me go ahead and just share my screen once more so that I can share where you can find a recording of this parent workshop. So you can actually just go onto our YouTube channel. It's just at Strategies for Learning. You can subscribe, set up alerts, and you'll get notified when the workshop recording is available. And you can share that with maybe other parents that that could be interested in this type of content. And then to sign up for and to get notified for upcoming workshops, whether it's free parent workshops or student workshops, um, you can go to our website at strategiesforlearning.com and sign up for a newsletter. We promise you we don't spam our parents. We really try to be very intentional about the emails that we send, really provide some really great resources for families. And then lastly, if you have questions about anything that we discussed or even about our services in general, if you have questions about the beyond high school course, just you can send me an email at info@strategiesforlearning.com. Let me know that you attended the workshop and you had these questions, and I'd be happy to schedule a free phone call consultation with you to make sure everything is addressed and I can help you out that way. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time, and we'll close off for the afternoon, but we hope that we'll see some of you in our future workshops. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.